this channel is not just going to be about fitness and exercise. I have another love, which is, scary movies. So, this year, Netflix came out with its second Haunting series. This one is Haunting of Bly Manor, so I'm going to review it, and this is episode 1. Episode 1 starts out where there's a lake. It's really, really dark outside, and you can slowly see like a woman's head start to emerge out of the water. And then there's a cut scene where there's a woman in a hotel room waking up. So you can kind of infer that the lake scene where the woman's coming out is part of a dream. So the woman wakes up, she's in a hotel room. The room door is slightly cracked, and she is reciting this type of poem in her head about having a lover, losing a lover, and something about a willow tree. She goes into the bathroom. She stares at the water in the sink. Then she stares at the water in the tub. And then it jump cuts again to her pulling up to this massive house. They refer to it as a castle, but like in my mind, what I think of a castle is not what it seemed to me. It was just like a really, really big, big house. Probably like a mansion, but it was like super, super old, like 1700s, 1600s. Well, she pulls up into this cab, and then it jumps to these people at this long table, and there's a Middle Eastern man who stands up, who has this thick British accent, who's explaining that he couldn't believe that the man and the woman at the head of the table, which apparently are about to get married, and this is their engagement dinner, or not engagement dinner, their rehearsal dinner, that he couldn't believe that the woman of the pair had asked him to give a toast at the wedding, but then she let her explain, no, 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 not the wedding, at the rehearsal dinner. So he goes into like kind of like this macabre, like not positive, like not the type of speech you want to hear when you are about to get married. The woman that we saw in the previous scene, she's walking in. He looks at her, kind of smiles. She sits down. Then he begins his toast, which essentially is like 50% of all marriages ends in death. Essentially, like you're gonna love this person till they die. 50%. So I guess it was like a play on the 50% of a marriage is ending in divorce. So he says 50%, ends in death, and that when you fall in love with someone, you have to be comfortable with the fact knowing that you'll love them and they'll eventually die. Like you'll die or they die. So which was kind of like macabre or whatever, but he says a couple of jokes at the end, makes everybody laughs, and then it jumps to later on in the night. Everybody's inside, they're sitting around a fire. The engaged couple are kind of cold up, and they were like, I guess the bride, she's saying, the groom wanted us to stay here after the wedding tomorrow, but she didn't want to stay anywhere where there's haunted, because apparently this huge mansion where they're at used to be a convent, and there's supposedly like a rumor where this nun, you can walk around and you see her like crying in the corner, and the bride was like, no, no, I don't want to do anything like that. I don't want to stay in a place like that. And then the groom tries to comfort her and says that the only reason why they tell these like little ghost stories is so that people can pay a little bit more coins to be a part of the whole haunted experience. There's another couple that's also sitting around who basically says that they were given this like a ghost story on their honeymoon where they were in, I think, Ireland, and there was like a staple boy named Seamus who got kicked in the face, who apparently like haunts the ground. So the lady that we've been following for the first part of this episode, she says that she has a ghost story. This ghost story is not particularly hers, but it's a ghost story that she wants to tell. It's not going to be a short ghost story. It's a pretty long ghost story, and it has many, many ghosts, and she just wants to tell it. So everybody like kind of like leans in like they're ready to hear it. She picks up it's clearly some type of alcohol. I'm a Scotch drinker, so in my mind she's drinking like a stiff like Glenlivet or something like that. So she's drinking the scotch and she begins her story. So it jump cuts. Okay, so this period, I'm sorry, I should have told you that this period took place in Northern California in 2007. So the story that the lady's about to tell jumps to London in 1987, where there is a teacher. She is walking down the street. The narrator basically tells you that she has seen a posting about being an au pair for these two little kids, this countryside. She's going to meet Mr. Wingrave, who's the uncle of these two kids, to possibly get this job. She almost steps off on the curb and is almost hit by a car. And as the car passes, you see a reflection of a dark figure with glasses, and it's like a light glow. Like it's like kind of like if his eyes were little light bulbs. They're like glowing in the glasses. So she's taken aback. She's a little scared. She jumps, but it's almost as if this is a familiar sight to her. Like it throws her off, but it's like, yeah, I'm kind of used to it. So she goes. She's an American in London. She's talking to Mr. Wingrave about this position. He asks her, like, why would a woman in her 20s be interested in taking a job where these little kids, because most of the people who apply for a position like that are usually elderly. And she was just like, well, you're asking me what's the catch with me, what's the catch with this, because I've seen this job posted for the last 6 months every month, and the way that you describe it, being a live-in au pair for these two brilliant children in this beautiful house in this beautiful countryside, why is it so hard for you to find someone to take this position? He gets a little miffed about it, and I think she kind of like agrees within herself that she probably didn't get the job. So the next scene, she is at a bar, drinking beer, and she also has like the newspaper. I guess she's circling wanted ads, because she's at this point she's been in London for 6 months. She hasn't had a job, so she's in desperate need of a job. So while she's sitting there, Mr. Wingrave, the guy that he just interviewed, walks into the bar. He sits at the other end. She grabs her beer and she follows him, and she's just like, yeah, I know I didn't get the job, so if I didn't get the job, kind of like tell me why, what's the, well, not why she didn't get the job, but tell him the catch to the job, since she's not gonna get the job anyway. And he says, uh they just started talking. I can't remember exactly how the conversation started to flow, but he basically talks about how his nephew was at boarding school, and he's no longer at the boarding school, and how the kid's parents had died 2 years earlier. And then the following, when he did get the au pair, the next au pair to come watch after them, the au pair committed suicide. So now there's a lot of mystery around the house, and people are basically saying, like, being superstitious, saying that the job is not a good job and that you might die and that the place is haunted, so on and so forth. So they continue to talk, and she basically talks herself into getting a job. He basically tells her she's hired. So it jumps to her in a hostel, which I found out what that was later. She's at a hostel. She's in this kind of like a um, dingy hotel. And when she walks in, you notice that all of the mirrors are covered. She's like super, super happy. She calls her mom, tells her mom that, hey mom, I got this job. I don't know when I'm gonna be back in America. Yeah, I did tell you she's American. Yeah, she's American. I don't know when I'm gonna be back in America, but it's a really, really good job at a really, really nice place. I'm really, really happy about it. And her mom asked her, just from the inference from the one side of the conversation, are you sure you're not just running from something? And she's like, no, no, mom, I'm not running from anything, blah, 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 blah. So she starts to pack up her room. She snatches, the mirrors were covered up with like sheets. She snatches the sheets off the mirror. As she's walking out, she sees that dark figure again with the light eyes, light glasses actually, and she just kind of walks off. The next scene, she's standing on the curb. This really like I'm not a I'm not a car aficionado, but it's an old model car pulls up. She gets in. The guy that's driving the car introduced himself as Owen, saying that he's like gonna drive her to Bly. It's called it's Bly Manor, and it's in a part of the country called Bly. He explains that he is originally from Bly. He left Bly and went to France. He studied as a chef, and now he's back. As she falls asleep, she wakes up, and right as they're pulling up to this massive estate, and she says, "Hey, can I walk from here?" So she begins to walk. She runs in. She hears this little girl singing, and the little girl is actually singing the song of the poem that the lady who woke up in the hotel after seeing the lady come out the lake, the poem that she was reciting is the song that the little girl is singing. As her name is Danny, the teacher turned au pair that's walking up to the little girl. Her name is Danny Clayton. She walks up. The little girl's super, super happy to see her. Like, hi, you must be Danny. Danny mentioned something about the lake, and the little girl was like, "Yeah, stay away from the lake. It got leeches in it. It's not good. Let's veer away from the lake." So, they walk up, they get to the house. That she's introduced to Hannah Gross, who's the housekeeper. Well, they didn't get to the house. She's walking away, and she runs with the little girl. She runs into Hannah Gross and Miles, the little brother. Hannah Gross is the housekeeper. She's standing over the well in the backyard, and she's just kind of like really, really distant, like deep, deep in thought. When Danny speaks to Miss Gross, she's a little startled, but she's like, "Hey, how you doing? Whatever, whatever." She walks her up to the house. Danny's super excited. She's showing her like the entire house. They go from room to room, and in any haunted story that includes a large house, there's a wing of the house where it used to be occupied by the two parents that now passed away. That is off limits. They show her to her room, and she is starting to get undressed in her new room, and the little boy is like peeking, like smiling stuff, and she catches him before she can take off her top and is like, "Hey, what are you doing? What's up?" And they exchange, they talk a little bit back and forth. He's talking about how excited he is for her to be there. I think this is when he gives her like the little comb. It's like a little comb with a butterfly, and she sticks it in her hair or whatever. So after she gets dressed, she goes down, and Owen, the guy that was the driver, is apparently the chef, and he's cooking them lunch, and everybody. Well, it's dinner at this time. He says he can't stay for dinner because he has to go see about his mom, and the Miles, Flora, the little girl, Danny, and Hannah are sitting around. They're about to eat. Apparently, Miss Clayton attempts to make tea, but American tea is different from tea in England, London, so no one really likes the tea. Miss Hannah, even though she has her plate, she decides she doesn't want to go eat, and she goes takes the plate to put up for later. So it jumps where she is giving Flora a bath in the tub, and Flora it's like really kind of like happy then sad in the tub, and it's almost as if she sees somebody standing behind Danny as she's giving her a bath. So it's just kind of like watching her eyes. When the lady feels when Danny feels like she's looking at somebody behind her, she turns around to see who she could possibly be looking at, and Flora gets like really, really mad, asks her who gave her the comb in her hair, and so Danny explains that Miles, her little brother, her big older brother actually, had given it to her, and Flora explains that the comb belonged to Miss Jessel, who was the au pair they had prior to her that had committed suicide. So she was just like, oh, well, I'll take it out, whatever, whatever. But then Flora's whole personality changes again to a happier spirit. And she's like, I was wrong. It's okay. You can keep it, whatever, whatever. So she gets out the tub. Danny stands up. She looks in the mirror. She sees the black guy with the black, not the black guy, but the black figure with the glasses and the light behind it. She's taken aback. She wipes the mirror super super fast, and he disappears. She goes. She tucks Miles in. She explains to Miles to not call her Danny anymore, to refer to her as Miss Clayton, because Miss Gross had told him previously that that's what he should call her. And she goes and she tucks in gets ready to tuck in Flora, but Flora has like these huge doll houses with these little dolls, and they look like voodoo dolls to me. If anybody seen like the little voodoo dolls, one of the dolls looks really, really a lot like Danny, and Danny asked Flora if it was supposed to be her. And she's like, no, silly, they're just dolls. Um, she puts there's just like a doll that's under the dresser that Danny tells Flora that she needs to start picking up her doll. She sees the gray dressed doll with no face and long black hair. She goes to pick it up, and Flora like loses it for a little bit and like, no, she belongs on the dresser. She stays on the dresser. So she puts her back under the dresser, and she goes to go tuck Flora in, and Flora's like, promise me that you, once you go to bed, that you don't get out of bed. And she's just like, I can't really promise that, but she was like, at least promise that tonight that you won't go wandering in the house, that you'll stay in your bed tonight. So Danny promises she's not gonna wander the house. She goes to bed, but she's restless. Like she just can't go to sleep. Like the first time in a new atmosphere, it's always hard to sleep. Like even if you're moving to like a new apartment, new house, it's always like really difficult to fall asleep that first night because it's strange to you. So she couldn't go to sleep. So she gets up, she goes to the kitchen, she starts making some tea. She hears a creaking noise. She goes to try to follow the creaking noise. She doesn't see anything. The kettle that she had put on the stove starts whistling like really, really loudly. So she runs to take the tea off or whatever. So she fixes her tea. She gets some cookies and she's going to bed. And you can kind of see in the background, kind of lurking behind her, there's a black figure with one of those when the plague was a big thing, the doctors had that little like bird mask thing. You can tell that that's what that is. So she goes to her room. We infer that she wants to sleep. She slept fine the next day. They're running in the garden and playing, and the kids, she looks up at the house, like they're in front of the house. She looks up at the house, and on an upper level, I call it a balcony, but later on they refer to it as the parapet. Not really fancy enough to know what that word is. So she sees like a guy like staring at her. She waves at him, but he doesn't recognize her or like acknowledge her existence. He doesn't wave back or anything. So they go in for what is assumed to be lunch. Again, Miss Hannah is not eating. They're talking. The phone rings, and Mr. Owen, the chef, goes to answer it. No one says anything. And they explain that they've been having some prank calls where people call and don't say anything. In comes the gardener, who we find out is Jamie. They Danny has never met Jamie. Jamie doesn't introduce herself. She doesn't say anything. She starts washing her hands, I guess, because she's the gardener. She's probably dirty. And she's going to come eat lunch with them. And she mentioned something about, why are you feeding the gremlins to Owen? And Flora's real proper, like, since I'm not a gremlin, we're perfectly good children or whatever. And she comes over. She splashes water. Owen says something about that. Are we sure that they're not? Are we sure that they're gremlins? Um, and so she splashes water on their school or whatever. So Danny talks about how, asks Hannah, is there any man that's like doing some type of work? because she explains that she saw somebody on the parapet. They explain that the only way to get to the parapet is to go to the forbidden wing and then walk out. They don't really know how anybody had gotten up there or whatever. So they kind of like push it off. After everybody eats, except for Hannah, she walks over to the the parapet, through the wing and onto the parapet, and she finds one of her little dolls, the little voodoo doll type deal. And she comes outside. I might be a little bit out of order because my memory is like super jumbled. So she comes out with the little thing in her hand, and as she's looking outside, she notices it's like a little chapel on the grounds. She sees like lights flickering in the chapel. So she walks over to the chapel with the little voodoo doll. I don't know what it's called. Um, and she finds Miss Hannah sitting there, still in deep thought among some candles. She walks up on Miss Hannah, and Hannah, a little startled, said, "What did you startled? What did you find?" She said that she went to the parapet. She didn't find any man, but she did find one of little Hannah's toy. I mean, Flora's toys. Hannah explains that these are some type of tokens or totems that Flora creates to kind of like keep people safe. Like they've gone through a lot, losing their parents and losing Rebecca, Miss Jessel, the previous au pair. Hannah explains that the previous au pair, Rebecca had fell in love with this man who stole money from the uncle, and he kind of like took off and disappeared or whatever. And just kind of after that, Rebecca was really, really heartbroken, so she committed suicide after that. um Danny asked Miss Hannah why, what's the meaning behind the candles, and she explains that she lights the candles for the people who had passed away, so on and so forth. So we jump back to the house. It's time for the kids to go to bed. So she starts putting the kids to bed. Miles is like, I want to play a game. I'm not ready to go to bed. And she's like, no, you're going to bed. So she walks out of Miles' room. It's kind of like a Jack and Jill type deal. So you can stand in one room and look over to the other room. So Danny walks out of his room and into Flora's room. She tucks Flora in, and Miles walks in and says that he wants this fan because the only way he can sleep is with the fan that's in Flora's closet. I think he called it cupboard, but it was closet. So Miss Danny goes into the closet to retrieve the fan, and Miles closes the door and locks her in it, and Miss Danny loses her ish. Like, she is screaming, she's yelling, open up the door, open the door. You can tell that she's getting really, really claustrophobic. She noticed that there's a mirror in there with her, and she sees the dark person with the light eyes again, and she scrambles to cover it up, and she ends up knocking it over, and she's just in there like just sweating, like freaking out. So you can tell that some time has passed, because Miss Danny, I guess, passes out on the floor. The kids finally open the door. She runs out. She's super, super mad. The kids are trying to apologize, saying it was an accident. They don't know. The door got stuck, whatever, whatever, whatever. And she's just like, just go to bed. Just go to bed. Just go to bed now. Go to bed. So she leaves their room, and she noticed these muddy footprints, and she assumes it was the kids going outside. Me, with the not so trained eye that I have, those footprints look a little big to be kids' footprints. But and then she ends up going to bed, and that's pretty much where episode 1 leaves off.